to order this morning. We're going to avoid trying to approve minutes from the last meeting. We'll do that for the next major committee meeting. But this morning's topic is to hear from CIPLAN FEDC, understand the goals and directions for this year. So I'd like to hold questions until Jim can go through his presentation, and then we'll open the floor. And we have about an hour today. So thank you everyone for joining. Jim, thank you for joining me in the boardroom this morning, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Everyone hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear out there in Zoom world. Anyone?
You got a couple of thumbs up.
Okay. So, well, good morning to everyone. We've been feverishly working at the EDC to try to organize ourselves for maximum benefit due to a number of things, which we're going to cover today. But I wound up talking to almost all of you that are part of this audience, maybe one-on-one about a variety of things, but we haven't really ever had the opportunity to talk about the big picture. So that's our goal here, is to provide you guys with as much detail as you need in order to understand at least what our proposed direction and plan is for the coming year, get your feedback, and to try to make sure that we're aligned. So for those of you that are online, can we bring up the presentation? All right. So really what this, while she's putting this up, what this is all designed to do is to build on the set of materials we started to put together almost immediately after the passing of Ed. We were in the midst of a strategic planning study with regards to how the EDC worked when we lost Ed. So the combination of those three things, having a major strategic plan effort underway, COVID and all of the implications, including many of the good things that have come from our collaborative work with the county and other stakeholders, and then trying to capture what was the right way to structure when we lost Ed. Those three things kind of came together. And if you don't mind, Tammy, flip to the next chart. Thank you. We're going to talk specifically about our mission and our vision, but I think broadly, when you speak to people about what is it that the EDC is about, our goal has always been to try to expand the economic opportunity here in Warren County. And there are a number of things that are involved with that, but I wanted to highlight a couple of those things that we talk about all the time that don't necessarily make their way directly into our mission statement, but are clearly a part of what we do. One of those is to make sure that we support job retention and growth. That's been incredibly important during the COVID times. I would say the lion's share of our effort together with the county around economic recovery, with many of you, has been to try to focus on how do we maintain the business base that we have. And then, of course, we are always trying to diversify and broaden our tax base, which COVID has clearly highlighted our need to do. At a high level, I wanted to point out a couple of things. We've met in the budget planning process with a number of people in the county, and we've had a meeting with Ryan and some of the members of this committee, and proposed that our funding stay flat for this coming year. However, we are expecting to spend well into our reserves. In other words, we're going to spend more than we are allocated. We're going to talk specifically about how and why. And many of the priorities that we've heard from you kind of align with where the study from Camoin had pointed us, but I wanted to point out several of them. Clearly, we need to continue to be organized to be able to help businesses recover from COVID. There are many programs, many resources that are available, lots of people working on this. And so our efforts have been to try to make sure that we don't duplicate effort, but that we synergize with, for instance, the chamber and its efforts and the county and its efforts. And I think so far that's been one of our biggest successes is being able to be nimble enough to be a partner and a player in that. One of the things that we're going to talk about in this presentation is that there is a new stream of economic development that most economic development organizations are not positioned to be able to capture and support. And that is the amount of professional relocation that is occurring. We see it clearly in our real estate and to some degree in our tourism numbers, but there is an enormous movement, particularly from the city, but from in general, highly concentrated urban areas to areas that are less dense and are perceived to be safer and of high quality of living. Any of you that are staying close to the real estate numbers understand what's happened to the real estate market over the summer, but this is also playing its way out in the tourism world, where people who might come for a vacation are actually coming as a strategy to try to be away for as long as they can, sometimes for months at a time. And when that happens, there's an opportunity for us to capture those professionals who have discovered that they can do whatever it is that they do and not necessarily be co-located with either their business or with the larger organization that they're a part of. It's hard to define this, but it's clearly an activity that's going on, and it's an important part of any economic development efforts over the next few years. If you're an accountant that works for one of the big four accounting firms, you don't necessarily have to live in New York City. And you may be used to coming to someplace like this region for vacations, or because your family has connections here, or simply because it looks attractive. But our goal would be to figure out how we could get you to stay. And how would we capture that amount of economic activity as part of our overall effort? And of course, there's an opportunity for us to attract small, medium, and even sometimes large businesses that are looking to put themselves in a place that is less dense. So it's a significant amount of our effort, and we're going to talk specifically about how we want to approach that. We definitely want to help not only the county, but all local governments in what we anticipate will be another round of infrastructure-related funding that may make itself available in a post-election cycle. If you look historically, almost invariably after any national election cycle, there's generally discussion about infrastructure funding. And so we want to prepare the county and all of its various municipal partners to be as nimble and as responsive to take advantage of those opportunities as we can. Our effort has been primarily focused on broadband here, but they're larger than broadband. They include water and sewer, and even larger issues of transport and other forms of infrastructure. So we're going to talk specifically about some of the things that we're doing there and look to get some of your input. One of the things that is a mainstay of our economy here is tourism. And while I'm still trying to get my arms around exactly what the figure would be, there's no question that it is one of the largest pieces of our local economy. A back of a napkin would suggest at least 25%, but I think it may be larger, and it certainly may be larger right now in the short term. When something is that big a share of your economic pie, then all of the entities that support economic development need to be aligned to get the maximum benefit out of that. Now, this is sometimes murky water. There are lots of people working on tourism, and it is not our goal to assert ourselves in the process, but in the same way as we've done with COVID, we'd love to be able to figure out how we could partner and help fill some of the gaps, particularly for some of the far-flung areas of the county. I think this may be a place where we can add some additional surface area. We may also be able to provide some data and some best practices from other parts of the country that may be of use to anyone that's working in the tourism sector. But I do believe that one of the things that we can do is to help crystallize a goal. And that is not simply to grow and to nurture the tourism industry, but to clearly help this region move to a year-round tourism economy. many of the structural problems that we struggle with in the tourism world, for instance, seasonal employees, and the business cycle associated with high seasons and low seasons, all can be addressed if we could figure out how to smooth the tourism world into more of a year-round premise. However, that is not going to be a simple task. That's a generational task. And it's something that I think what we'd love to be able to do is to figure out what are the long lead items that could participate or could help create that, and how can we help sponsor some of those. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about another big section of our economy, which is the combination of medical device and healthcare. Those are two areas that continue to grow, and they deserve special attention. Thank you. Classically, if you look back at the EDC since its institution, all of it in its various forms, no matter who's been leading it, its mission has always revolved around retaining, growing, and attracting business. Sometimes the words change, but I think that is viewed as the classic mission of any economic development organization. In 2020, based on not only feedback, but the need to constantly evolve ourselves to be able to be right-sized and focused on the right mission, the EDC undertook a strategic planning process. And we redrafted our vision and mission, and you can see that here. You know, an economy that creates opportunity and prosperity for all of Warren County. And you can see specifically some of the elements that we're talking about in the proposed new mission based on the strategic planning study we undertook. However, and there's certainly nothing wrong with this vision and mission. The problem was that it was developed prior to COVID, and all of the things that we have subsequently learned from our efforts to try to stabilize and then rebound our local economy. And then it's also important to understand that that strategic planning study for the EDC was undertaken when we were being led by Ed. And Ed Bartholomew is a figure I'm sure all of you know better than me, was a mainstay here in the North Country. And we can no longer take for granted many of the attributes that Ed brought, his extensive network, his deep knowledge of how this kind of work was done, you know, built over a lifetime. We now have to figure out how we do those things without somebody who was kind of a once in a lifetime figure. So what that meant for us is we had to kind of go through another iteration of this. Do you mind? When I stepped in right at the end of July, it was, I believe, July 29th, the first thing that we focused on was just making sure that we were visible to you and to all of our municipal partners and to our community that we serve, including our members, just making sure that people knew that the offices were still open and that we continue to still be there for them. In that process, we immediately started to try to communicate with people and start to listen. And what I came to understand is the COVID-related, recovery-related work was going to dominate our agenda, and we needed to structure ourselves in such a way that we could do that. I'm probably on Zoom calls with Mike and many of you more than I am with some of the traditional players that we've been working with for many years. And I think this has been a really healthy development for us. It's forced us to kind of rethink our role in the community, what we bring to the table, and how we can best serve. I mean, I would tell you that I've spent more time meeting with many of you than we've spent time meeting as a board. We've got to evolve the EDC to be as deeply involved in its back office governance as many of you have engaged yourself to be. And in no way is that a criticism. It's just a realization that the structure that we had pre-COVID of meeting monthly is probably not enough. You know, our board meets monthly. Our subcommittees meet, you know, just like yours do. However, your committees are meeting weekly, and things are moving week to week much quicker than they have in the past, and we've got to adjust. And you can see some of the things that I'm suggesting that we would want to do based on some of the feedback that we're getting from you and from our own board and community. We've got to develop better communications. We've got to develop measures that help us all clarify what we're working on to the constituencies we serve and make sure that we can gauge progress. We've got to figure out how to better organize the various economic development organizations. For nearly a decade, Ed Bartholomew was instrumental in anything that was associated with economic development, not only at the county level, but at the city of Glens Falls level, at the town of Queensbury level, at the level of integrating other regional planning and economic development organizations. I have found Ed as the signatory or leader of more than 9 economic development organizations over 10 years. That means we got to look at every single one of those and say, well, how do we want to work in a world where we don't have Ed? It could be that we do things exactly the same way as we did before, but it also represents an opportunity for us in dialogue with you and with others to figure out if there is another model that makes more sense given what we know now. Now, one thing I would like to clarify, and we'll cover this in more detail, is it's really important for us to provide synergistic, efficient back office services to anybody who's utilizing these. I would suggest, for instance, that the bookkeeping, the compliance, just the storage of the files, the administration of these, I think we probably are best positioned to do that and to do that as cost effectively as anybody. But in terms of the decision making, the governance, the front end, what I would consider to be more the business end of all of these organizations, I think there's a fair amount of opportunity for us to think about how we want these groups to work. And then based on all of this, it was our intention to develop a plan that would take us not only through the end of the year, but that would lead us into a new generation of economic development for our region. Here's what we're hearing from not only you, but from many in the community. We clearly have to continue to meet our traditional mission. And we do answer the phone right now to support existing businesses who are looking to expand or who have business challenges, as well as act as a resource for any new businesses that are looking potentially either relocate or even considering us in their operations. And I will tell you that I'm pleasantly surprised by the level of activity that's occurring in both those arenas. We have more than 10 active projects underway for either existing regional businesses that are looking to grow or for new businesses that are looking to relocate here. I don't know how that compares in a pre-COVID world, and I'm not really sure even how important that is. I just know that I was pleasantly surprised to see that the phones were not silent. And some of those are entities that you're familiar with, and some of them are net new entities. And of course, we will share what we can about those things as each one of these opportunities emerges. But all of them have been surprisingly these are not just people probing. They're clearly going to commit to business growth in this arena. Some of our healthcare entities are in the midst of that and looking for assistance. Some of our medical device entities are looking for assistance. Some entities from outside the region in the medical device world are looking at potentially siting themselves here. And general, small, and medium companies are looking at Warren County as a potential place to build their business. I would say, though, that we probably spend more of our time trying to make sure that we can help our existing businesses just deal with the ravages of COVID and the issues of economic recovery. Our efforts have been to try to align with the chamber, for instance, and to fill the gaps where the chamber is already, for instance, doing things like advocating. We generally team with them as opposed to do that on our own. When we sit down with the county, we look at anything that we can do to help you as you uncover areas that you want to focus on, whether or not it was a part of our original charter at the beginning of the year or not. I would probably say 40% of our time as a group, and right now our group is very small, it's just John Wheatley and I, is spent on this particular area. And I'm in no way complaining about that. But I think it's an important thing to understand that if we're dedicating nearly half of our time to that, we're clearly going to have to invest an additional resource for us to be able to do other things in addition to it. And those things include infrastructure support. I would say the next largest place where I've been spending time is trying to get our arms around what is going to be in the short term and what still remains to be done in the broadband world. When I listen to supervisors and people from the municipalities, particularly in the far reaches of the county, we clearly hear that broadband is no longer an issue of convenience or leisure. Broadband is a fundamental, essential to connect children to schools, to connect patients, particularly elderly or those that are immune compromised, to medical services that do not put them at risk to receive medical care, and for businesses to be able, even small businesses, to be able to operate in the increasingly dislocated virtual world that today's business world is dominated by. You cannot do that if you do not have access to consistent, reliable broadband. We understand this. So quickly after I stepped in, we looked to see what it is that we could do that would be of maximum benefit in the short term. Maps that we had were more than 5 years old. We knew that any grant application would require up-to-date information. So we went to the original vendor who did a full inventory of Warren County and has quite honestly worked across the state of New York. It's been one of the leading providers of these services to a number of municipalities in New York. We asked them how quickly could they drop what they were doing and update our map study. We're several weeks into that now, but we saw the first interim report on that last week. And I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged not only by the fact that we've been able to update those maps, but also that we've been able to work with the partners like Slick and the other carriers to get a clear picture of what's on the table to be completed out of the last round of broadband funding. And when we find problems, we've been able to effectively partner with you and with not only many of you individually, but with your communities to be able to solve those problems. The most recent of which was just getting the switch for the broadband corridor access for the Thurman section that runs up towards Stony Creek. I think for several months, this had languished looking for a location. And what we were able to do is to bring the parties together, the broadband parties that were kind of trying to figure out this problem on their own, together with the municipal partners, and find an alternative that would move this along. And last week, I think together we were able to push a resolution through that found a location for that. But the important part about this is that I didn't know that that's the kind of work we would need to engage in, but we're quite happy to do it, because the closer we are to these carriers and the closer we are to you as communities that need these services, the more likely we are going to be at being able to get you what you need. But there are clearly other infrastructure needs as well. Water and sewer is a really important one. Long term, the ability for many of our communities to grow will be tied to our ability to provide scalable, particularly wastewater solutions. This is one place where I have a fair amount of background. I've spent much of my professional life working in water, and so this is a place I feel comfortable with. And I think there are solutions and opportunities that maybe we have not been able to look at simply because of acumen. But I think there are ways for us to think about wastewater in more modular or scalable ways that may present opportunity for us. When I think about this, I think about opportunities in places like North Creek, or in Warrensburg, or in Chestertown, all of which would enable development, which is currently probably hamstrung by the lack of wastewater. Also, clearly, we want to support the ongoing efforts around the lake as the principal gem of our county. keeping the water quality there to be world-class is a fundamental strategic need in the region. And it was something that Ed was deeply involved in advocating for, and we will continue to do that. There are other things. We've got to focus on long-term, we've got to focus on our energy to make sure that the energy mix that we have available is going to meet the needs of industry for the next generation. That includes making sure that we have the appropriate amount of clean energy and solar. It means having access to the natural gas or alternatives to electric grid that are needed by our industries. And we need to think about developable property as a piece of infrastructure and go beyond the handful of lots that EDC represents either on their own or advocates for, and think about the entire county as an area that is developable, and work with you and each municipality to make sure that we know how would we, if somebody wanted to put a business in a particular place that's not quite ready, how would we make ourselves as nimble as possible to do that. On the local business side, we're very focused on the medical device world. We want to make sure that we're being as big a partner as we can be to cement the hallmark players that are already in our community and also allow them to grow. But we would love to be able to create an opportunity for others to come here, particularly small startups in the medical device world. This is something that I've begun to explore with the town of Queensbury, because many of the medical device entities right now are in Queensbury, looking at how we might be able to develop kind of facility that would allow for startups to feel like they had some infrastructure to grab onto here, and we're not trying to figure this out by themselves. As these companies grow and evolve, it will be natural for people who are a part of the sphere of Navalist or Angio or Bard or any of the incarnations of the companies that have been here to want to come back here. And we need to be able to meet people more than halfway with how would we do that? Are we receptive? Do we want this? Of course we want this, but we've got to make sure that it's clear to the outside world that we do. The Route 9 corridor is an important part. I know many of you have been involved in that planning and study work. We need to continue to follow up on that to make sure that that Route 9 corridor continues to be a gateway. And as I said, we need to continue to support tourism in any way we can. To do all of these things, we need to retool our communications. Right now, let me explain how it went to. I was sitting at home and then I was going through our website, and my daughter looked over my shoulder and she said, "Hey, Dad, 2005 called and they want their website back." She was kidding with me, but I think she's saying, there was some truth in what she was saying. We depend largely on an infrastructure that was based around making ourselves attractive to site developers. And that made sense 10 years ago. We had shovel-ready sites. We wanted to make sure that that's what people saw when they did an internet search. Today, that's not the only and certainly not the primary way that we should be available and appear to the outside world. We need to be on social media platforms. We're not. We need to do that in a way that's not gimmicky, but actually delivers information that people can use. If you're running a 5-person marketing firm in Brooklyn out of your loft, and you've just lived through the last year, you're moving your business. You don't want to stay in New York City anymore, and you're evaluating your opportunities. What do we look like? Are we even appearing in their searches? Would we even know where to go to make sure that we're a part of their world while they're considering this? They're on social media platforms that we don't have any presence on. And in order for us to capture their attention, we have to do more than just say, "Hey, we're Warren County, here's our stuff." We've got to have content that's actually attractive. We've got to have people who relocated here telling their story about, this is exactly what I was hoping for and more. All of this is going to take a fair amount of effort and resource, and we clearly understand that. I think we will start by immediately starting to create social media and try to move away from an email and web-driven world to social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, the same ways that many of you guys are communicating in your municipalities. We need to catch up with you and then hopefully be a viable partner, reflecting the very best of our region in all of these ways to anybody that is looking for information. And we need to work with professionals who understand not just search engine optimization, but the way that people are interacting with the virtual world to figure out what to do next. This is an emerging field, and I've been proud that people like Mark Bean have jumped in to try to help. Many of the local entities that we have in the way of marketing communications are very viable partners in this, and so we're quickly trying to figure out who's good at what and how we can utilize them as quickly as possible. There are many opportunities for us here, but it will be a major focus of our efforts. What this means is we obviously can't do all of this with an interim president and one other resource in the group. We clearly need at least 4 to 5 people. This matches with what was in the Des Moines study. It's a matter of simply deciding the pace and be opportunistic about picking the right people to help us with the right problems as quickly as we can. I do believe this is going to take at least some amount of phasing. We won't be able to just drop a team in place by year's end that will do all of these things. I think we probably have to take on 2 or 3 of these things and then come back to you and our other partners and say, how are we doing on this? And are we ready to take on additional work? You might. Important for you to know where our funding profile is. Relative to where we were actually funded a number of years ago, the EDC's request to the county is less than it has been in recent years. And this past year is exactly the same as what we asked for last year. Now, I know that in this particular budget time, asking for a flat funding amount is tantamount to asking for an increase. I understand the pressures that the county and everyone is under in terms of their public funding. However, I believe from listening to you that you clearly need, this region clearly needs investment in not only business attraction, but in business retention. We cannot afford to go backwards. We need to continue to grow our revenue base. We need to continue to diversify our revenue base. And in order to do that, I would implore you to consider what things would be better for us to spend this amount of dollars on. In terms of return on investment, I'm not quite sure yet how to crystallize that as a measure. I'm working on that, but I think that bang for the buck, the opportunity for us to be able to not only provide what we have traditionally provided, but many of the things that I just talked to you about, but to have that come at a flat funding level, I believe is good value. I have no trouble of advocating for that to you, to any other municipal partner, or to the public at large. I believe from listening over the last 60 days that there is not a person that I have talked to in this county that does not want their resources spent in underpinning and growing the economic base. They're worried, just like you are, that we cannot afford to come out of this haphazardly. We need to think about how do we come out of this as strong as we possibly can, learning what we've painfully had to learn, and pivoting in the directions that will be required in order for us to be successful. I think there is reason for optimism. I really, really believe that. And I'll tell you why. Because I am this story. 2014, I came from somewhere else. I've lived in, my wife and I have sold and bought 13 houses. Okay, we've lived across the world. We've gone everywhere. But when I came to Glens Falls and when I came to Warren County, I helped build a business here that I thought I would be here for a year or two to get established. And I fell in love with this place. I fell in love with not only the region in terms of all that it offers aesthetically. I mean, it's truly a beautiful place. But I fell in love with the opportunity that was here. We all know that there's been net migration out of New York, particularly upstate New York. I'm kind of a counter guy. When everybody else thinks the opportunity is somewhere else, the opportunity is right here. This place is not on fire. There are not floods of the century occurring every summer here. We are not under enormous water and drought pressures. We have unbelievable natural resources, not only in terms of the beauty of our area, But to underpin an economy with unlimited amounts of clean power and almost infinite amounts of water is a fundamental regional asset that will be priceless over the next 100 years. What we need to think about is how we want that growth to go. It is going to happen. The world is going to discover this place, not just because it's beautiful, but because it has the things that are needed. Now, how do we make sure that 50 years from now, it went the way we wanted it to go? We have to be conscious about this. Would you mind clicking through for me? This is what came out of the Comoin study. And remember that this all was suggested to us based on input that was derived prior to the COVID pandemic. But some of this is clearly true and is timeless. We definitely need to focus on the key industries here. We need to make sure that we first do no harm. How are we helping the things that underpin our economy today? Medical devices, healthcare, and tourism make up the majority of our local economy. We need to clearly identify what are the things we can do to support those things, because it's in all of our interests. Even if you do not have significant commercial entities in your particular part of Warren County, the county itself is benefiting from these core industries. Beyond that, we must figure out how to retain the businesses we have and help them grow wherever they are. We need to make sure that the infrastructure that we have meets the needs of today's and tomorrow's businesses, and that infrastructure to some degree includes workforce. This is more than just simply thinking about training initiatives, although I think there's much good work that is going on here. This is really about thinking about the cultural things that will allow us to build a workforce for the future here, so that we're not constantly importing in the people that we need. Around that workforce development and talent attraction, there is an opportunity for us to do even deeper collaboration with our educational partners. Having SUNY Adirondack here is another fundamental piece that most of upstate New York does not have. And quite honestly, no part of upstate New York has as good and as nimble an institution as we do. I think it can be easily confused right now. They're under great stress, as we all are. You know, their numbers are down. They're being challenged by the COVID pandemic in terms of how does it cause them to evolve their practices. But make no mistake about it. I've been here for 5 years. I've never seen any institution move quicker to meet the needs that are presented. Just quietly, last week, they managed to get a certification program around tourism that they started in last winter. They got that approved by the state. I think we sometimes miss what an asset this is. If you are in Essex County, you don't have this. If you're in Hamilton County, you don't have this. You don't have a partner that moves as fast, and you don't have as capable a institution. We need to make sure that not only do we continue to invest in it, but we take full advantage of it. I've been talking to Chris, Dr. Duffy, about how can the EDC be a better partner? How do we make the kind of joint investments that will deliver value for us that neither one of us could do by ourselves? I'm not sure what that answer will be, but I definitely know that I'm glad that we have it. Finally, I just want to make sure you know that in addition to hiring people to do all of these things, we need to work with all of you to figure out how to rationalize the support that we provide in all of the various economic development channels. We want to make sure that business flows through all the LDCs and IDAs and community development organizations, as was currently happening when we lost Ed. But I think there is an opportunity for us to sit down each organization by organization and say, well, how would we really like this to work? And we would be receptive to almost anything that somebody would suggest there if we think that it's in the interest of our community. There is no dogma whatsoever around the EDC must do anything. I don't come to this with any of the, I've been a board member for a number of years, but I am not wed to any part of how we've done this. And COVID has taught us that it's stupid for us to assume that models like this can't be challenged by the events of the day. So I do want you to understand that we'll be coming to you saying, how do you want county LDC to work? If you'd like it to work differently than it does today, then we'll be your partner in helping to figure that out. If you're quite happy with how it's working today, then we'll make sure that we resource to do that. Whatever the right answer is, that's what we want to do. In the meantime, there's a major effort underway to digitize everything that's been going on. Ed had 10 years of stuff in his head, and he had more than 10 years worth of stuff in his office. And then I discovered that there are places besides his office where there's stuff. So just to get our arms around all of that is going to take us probably the rest of the year. I have 2 scanners working 8 hours a day, feeding information in, so that those files will not only be available to us, but they'll be available to anybody that needs them. And we're going to democratize this so that we can work more effectively together in whatever model we choose. I think there's another chart. I did want to mention the last thing is, I know funding is probably why we got together to talk about what our funding profile is going to be for the coming year, but I just think of it as the opportunity for us to get started. Regardless of what funding decision we make, the EDC is a part of the fabric here, and we want to make sure that we're as good and strong a part of that fabric as we possibly can. I've listed a couple of things that I know from hearing from all of you, the things you would like us to continue to work on, but this list will continue to grow. Whatever it is that is of value to you that we need to do, we will add to this list. And I do want you to hear me clearly. We will go invest the reserves that have been developed by the EDC over a number of years. Ed was a very prudent municipal leader, and he has his rainy day fund, but today is the rainy day. So what we need to do is figure out what is the right level of spending into that reserve. And we need to make sure that whatever we do is a sustainable investment on behalf of our community. And if we're effective, we're delivering value that more than pays for our costs. Maybe not in the first 6 months, but certainly in terms of the long term. And we want to be accountable to that. Okay. Mr. Wow.
What I expected, but I'm not sure if everyone in the committee or our audience has heard this before, but I'm thrilled that you are leading the charge with the EDC. I'm absolutely supportive of what you're doing. And I think that the collaboration we have from the other organizations, the communities that are doing similar things, not the same, but similar things, have led to opportunities that just wouldn't get attached and work on. So I think we're moving in a great direction. One of the things that I did mention to Jim when we were talking about budget was that I was disappointed it didn't ask for more, because I think the direction that we're going is a necessary direction. And I think the plan that they have in place is exactly what we need to do, but that's for a later date. We'll talk about that. Jim's talked about metrics. I think that's what we have in front of us. We'll find some ways to measure the return on this investment, and then we'll have that discussion about whether or not we need to do additional fundings and see what we can get out of this. With that, I'm going to open up questions to the committee members first, and hopefully I'll do my best to identify anyone that has their hands up.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Leggett, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, what's the size of your office now? What's the staffing been, and where do you see the needs?
Right now, we have a contract administrator. We have a part-time bookkeeper. John Wheatley is actually the mainstay of the group. He's been there for even longer than Ed. He goes back, I think, to 2010. He's our continuity. And then there's me. So you have 2 staff members, you have a contractor, and we have somebody that we pay to keep our books for 10 to 20 hours a week. So it's a fairly small, modest group right now. I'm suggesting that we will want to grow that group to probably 4 to 5. And in the areas that I suggested to you, those are the things that we're considering. The board is obviously going to take a look at this based on the level of funding that we secure from our community partners, and then their comfort level around how much they feel comfortable spending into our reserve. So I don't know that we're in a position to tell you specifically what we would hire, but we did want to get your input around where your priorities were to make it part of that process. Did I answer your question?
Any other questions this morning?
Mike,
Sure.
Jim, Thank you. I really was impressed with your perspective in terms of kind of highlighting, our area. And you think of this in a national or maybe global fashion, no fires, no floods. The importance of concentrating on renewables, SUNY Adirondack, the ability to be nimble, okay? But I guess I have maybe a question in terms of the importance of social media in getting our message out to the world at large, to that couple in Brooklyn that wants to relocate to somewhere just because of the issues involved, and how we can intelligently put that message together in order to attract humanity to convince them of the beauty of Warren County.
So this is an area that I have to profess I am not an expert. However, the company I came from was really good at this. Just grew largely through a combination of social media and word of mouth. And so I certainly am going to follow the same approach that I did there, which is to let people who know this space help guide us. I know what we're trying to accomplish. How you doing, Mayor? Good. What we're trying to accomplish is to be present to more people and more decisions. But how to do that, what platforms and exactly what content, I think we need to listen to. We have really good, capable people in our community. It starts with Mark Behan. And anybody who has seen the leadership that Mark Behan has provided to this county, and certainly to me and the EDC in Ed's loss, knows that you would be foolish not to start with his tremendous institutional knowledge and then his network. And that's exactly what we're doing. But I think, there's a constellation of really good providers here who are doing really great work in all of these domains. We want to learn from all of them. It may be that we need to bring in some outside expertise from outside the area, but I'm not going to start there. I'd like to start with who we have here and see where they take us. I'd like the investment to be predominantly local, and then we will feather in maybe the needed things that come from somewhere else. There's not going to be one big contract. This is going to be 20 smaller efforts as we figure out how to be present in all of these places and how do we gauge our effectiveness. It's not simply page views. It's not simply liked. It's business metrics. And we've got to figure out how to tie whatever we wind up doing to things that deliver us real business opportunities, real net migration of people and professionals, real awareness, and understanding how that is. I don't have an answer yet for you, Supervisor, but I'm eager to try to figure it out, and we will come to you with it, and hopefully we will agree that we're at least more armed than we were before.
Thank you, Jim.
Other questions from the committee?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you. Good morning, Jim. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us about your vision with EDC. And I guess I have two questions. One, I want to make sure I understand the way EDC works with the county. So I was comparing a little bit like to the CBD in Lake George. We're all members of the economic development here at the county as a county committee, where obviously Mr. Wild is our chair for those purposes. But for EDC, I guess I'm wondering in terms of a budget and ask for funding. Typically during this time, we're reviewing different budgets from committee, from different departments and making decisions on those and having input to our budget officer. Is this forum, or is there an opportunity where committee members or supervisors, as you start to think about the ask for that funding, do we review your budget? Do we have a chance to kind of look at it and determine, ask some questions about it, or is that not provided?
I think that's better answered by me. We did have a budget meeting regarding the EDC. I believe, I'm not sure if it was broadcast or published, but we did have that discussion. It was agreed upon by the group that was there that this was the way to move forward.
Perhaps I can ask a point of clarification with that. Was that with the budget officer, with Kevin Garrity?
The budget officer, the chairman was there, our administrator was there.
Right, those aren't televised, so no. That's just if that would be I didn't make it to that one. I know that Jack and I made it to quite a few of the budget meetings, but typically after that meeting, the department comes to committee like we've seen this month. We've had really long meetings talking all about where the budget is and, you know, what's taking place in it. So that's why I was asking about that. Typically this month, we're seeing actual budgets in front of us as committee members after that meeting with the budget officer. So is there an opportunity?
Well, if there was a procedural thing that I missed, I apologize for that. But this was more of a discussion, at least in my mind, in terms of the scope and the direction of EDC. And part of it was to justify the request for the funding for 2021.
So there are existing agreements. We are currently the county's responsible party for economic development. In addition, we are the city of Glens Falls and the town of Queensbury. And each one of those agreements has specific, I guess, I don't know, the deliverables is the wrong term, requirements that we're supposed to meet in order to meet, to be that partner with that particular entity. I think what has happened in the past is that we have kind of treated that as a fait accompli, and in order to accomplish this goal, this is what we believe is an acceptable ask. I haven't been a part of those conversations as a board member in the past, but the way that I've seen them happen is that Ed said, I'm going to meet with the county. He has one presentation to the county, and then we move on. I don't believe that that process is necessarily the one that's going to enrich us with as much feedback as we need as we retool our plan. And so we're looking for as much surface area as we can get with all of you, both in formal meetings and informally. But I do believe that there is a clear set of agreements between us right now, and all we're settling on is what is a fair amount of investment in order to accomplish that. So
I guess then just to be very specific, what is that amount? That's what I'm looking for. Is it a
the chart shows it's
last year? As a committee member,
yes, it's $300,000 for the EDC and $50,000 to be the administrator for the LDC, the county's LDC. So the total is $350 for those two functions.
Is that the same as last year?
Yes. Would you
Yes.
mind? There's a chart in there that shows it, but in 2018 it was actually higher. In 2019 and 2020, we've settled on those figures. And so essentially, what you're seeing is a flat-funded organization for the last several years. I think if this was solely about are we being cost effective, I think we would have a very good case to make. We continue to deliver more services for the same amount of money. However, I really don't think that's our conversation. I don't think we want to have exactly the same as what we've had before. What we want to do is figure out how to meet the needs that are presented in front of us and how to do that as cost effectively as possible. Rather than ask you for additional money, and we had this internal debate as a board, should we come and ask, because it's clearly going to cost us more than we have spent in the past. And we said, eventually settled on, you know what we're going to do? We're going to ask for the same amount of money, but we're going to go get going on this other work. And I think as a community, we will see whether or not it's delivering the value and it's sustainable. And at which point we would consider asking for more money, because quite clearly to sustain it, it will require more money. But we're making essentially the investment in the bet initially. Does that answer your question? So beyond the 300,000, our budget last year was just under $600,000. And what we received from the various entities matched very closely to that total. This year, we're expecting that whatever we get funded from our municipal partners, we will spend significantly more than that. And I don't know the figure yet because my board hasn't met, and I can't speak on their behalf. But I can tell you that there is consensus around the fact that we will invest into the reserves of the organization to meet the needs of the community. I'm hoping I'm answering it.
Yeah, I'll touch base with you offline just about some questions I have regarding the reserve. But it sounds like your total budget then is 600 and the county's coming in at 350. You have contributions from other municipalities and
our members. We are also a member-driven organization. So all of those are our funding sources. And quite honestly, there are small amounts of income that are derived from our events. But I don't believe that that's significant enough. Reorganizing our events to be much more aligned with what the economic parties are, and think much less of them as a economic driver. So for instance, our annual meetings, I think need to be organized around topics that are needed by the community. How do we attract today's urban mobile professional? How do we build a year-round tourism economy? Those are the kind of things that I think are worthy of us gathering an audience for, but we're not doing that to make money. Hopefully we can cover our costs, but if we wind up having to subsidize those, then that's still the right investment to make. I think we think of our funding as coming primarily from our municipal partners, to a lesser extent from our members. And this year we will spend more than comes from both of those.
I'd like to stay on schedule. Are there any other questions from committee members? From other supervisors? Mr. Lehman, are there any questions or comments from social media?
Nothing at this point, Chair. Wow.
Let's see if the others from the Economic Government Task Force would like to make comments. This is good, easy. Thank you, everyone. Jim, any other comments?
I'd like to close by, first of all, thanking you for the opportunity to come speak, but really for the opportunity to serve. This is a remarkable community, one that I am proud to call home. One that I would love to be able to figure out how to provide as much support from the things that I've learned over my professional career as I possibly can. It is an honor to serve this county and its many, many residents. And every day that I have the opportunity to do that, and that our team has the opportunity to do that, I can assure you, you will get the very best of what we have.
Thank you. Before I close, I'd like to open up any other kind of questions or comments related to the committee direction, any opportunities that we may be missing from any supervisors, any thoughts, any issues, concerns.
Mike, it's Frank Dietrich, if I could.
Hello, Frank.
First, Jim, I want to thank Jim for jumping in with the speed he did and the insight that he brought immediately to the table. It was really amazing to see coming in. And I think the other piece here that's really impactful in my mind is the sense of urgency that Jim's conveying to me is especially critical. These are sea changes, as they call them, where the world's moving around us, and those that move quickly, Jim used the word agile in his deck, and that speed really counts. So action becomes really critical at this time. It's, tee up the approaches, boil them down, get the priorities straight, and start hitting them is something that this county, we're on the verge of really taking advantage of. New York City specifically. We're 3 hours away. They like being here, getting residents there up here, improving our tax base, building the economy, for example, is a huge opportunity. So my ask for the committee and the supervisors would be, it's a good time to move quickly. And whatever the funding decisions are, you all have to go through that. But speed right now, to me, would be number one priority. If we sit and wait because we can decide next year, other counties are going past us. I just did a search as a point of example. Greenville, South Carolina has 44 business development jobs open today. So they're not waiting for tomorrow. They figured out, let's get going. And, in our case, we're poised. We have every asset you need to have. So, from the business community, and certainly speaking for myself, the EDC support for me would be very, very strong.
Thank you, Frank. And actually for the committee and others information, I did spend some time very early in my term as chair of this committee, speaking to different members of the community about economic growth and what do we want it to look like. And I saw early on the migration opportunity that we had from professionals coming from downstate and urban areas. But there was a little pushback from time to time. And I think Jim mentioned it quite well during his presentation. The world's going to figure it out. They're going to recognize that we have a great community. We have the resources. And what we want that growth to eventually look like is going to be up to us. So as we go forward thinking about this, we need to also think not just for random growth, but what type of growth we want and where we want this in our communities to evolve into. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting. I think I'm a little late, but as long as there's no other questions. I'm sorry?
There's a question right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's back there? I can't tell.
It's Gene.
Oh, hello, Gene. Thank you. You're welcome.
I just want to thank you for this introduction. I know you and I had a nice conversation 10 days ago. And tourism is definitely a big asset to this community. And we'd like to meet with you at your convenience sometime in the next couple of weeks to kind of let us talk to you about what we're doing and what we like to see you can help us with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And just one other comment. Jim mentioned he joined EDC on the 29th of July, August, September. We're talking 60 days, and he's gotten to this level. It's kind of my benchmark. I'm going to wonder what's going to happen in the next 60 days. I'd like to challenge the guys around. But with that, if there's no other comments or questions, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Supervisor McDevitt. Someone else? Thank you, Supervisor Diamond. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.